My story and the story of why I sit here today accepting your nomination starts, as any good story does, it starts with my family. My family has a long tradition here in the 5th District. My parents' first house was in Simsbury, but my first memories are actually of Plainville. My grandfather was here today, worked at an engineering company in Plainville, still sits there today on Cook Street. And I remember being 3 years old, and when you're 3 years old, there's nothing that matters more to you than your little green tricycle. And my green tricycle was broken. The metal had fallen off of the back of it. And I remember being in Plainville with my grandfather when he welded back together my tricycle at that shop in Plainville. Many of my best memories are also from New Britain. My mother's family is from New Britain. My mother and her family grew up on Richard Street. Her grandparents were amongst the waves of Polish immigrants who came to New Britain and made that city great. My grandfather and my great-grandfather both worked at Fafner Ball Bearing during the industrial heyday of that city. They were among the workers that put that city on the map. They helped make that city great. But my mother also grew up in a time when little girls from post-World War II housing projects on Richard Street didn't really have a chance to go to college. Everyone told her that, her family, her friends. But if you know anything about my mother, you know anything about Kathy Murphy, don't ever, ever tell her that a thing can't be done. She put herself through college. She then put her husband through law school. And she raised a son to believe in the irresistible force of individual will. My mother taught me a lot of things, but she taught me this. When it matters most, when the odds are stacked against you, that's the moment that what counts is not conventional wisdom, not what everyone tells you can be done or could be done. What matters most is that feeling in your gut, that feeling that tells you what's right. And I'll tell you this, when I sat in the state senate last year, that feeling started to grow in me. I watched this president drag us deeper into a badly mismanaged and increasingly unjustifiable war. I watched this Congress hand over the reins of our energy policy to the oil and gas dinosaurs. I watched our Republican Party's insatiable drive to take our most revered social programs, Medicare and Social Security, and hand them over to the profiteering hands of the investment houses and drug companies. And as I watched this all, that feeling in my gut, that feeling that my mother taught me to listen to, got stronger and stronger. No matter how much time I spent in the state legislature, no matter how much I've loved the work there, I knew that this fight was too important to sit out. I knew that I had to be part of the change that can happen this November. Now, it won't be easy for me to leave the state legislature. I love the work I've done there. I feel like the luckiest guy in the world, having had the chance, the citizens of Southington and Cheshire and Wolcott and Waterbury, to represent them and lead my small march on state government, to serve all the people that have been here today. These past 8 years have been the greatest of my relatively short time on this earth. And I'll be sad to leave. I entered politics 8 years ago. I entered local politics as an advocate for opposing a power plant in my town that was being sited on a residential neighborhood on a very sensitive wetlands area. And I'd like to think that when my state representative, who had been there for 14 years, didn't come out and forcefully speak against that application, that my neighbors hoisted me up as the candidate to run against them. But the truth is that no one else wanted to run against it. And when no one raised their hand, I raised my hand and said, well, if you're not going to do it, I will. And I ran that campaign how Charlotte taught me to run campaigns, going house to house, going person to person. And I made a commitment at the beginning of that campaign that I was going to win it the old-fashioned way, that I was going to knock on everyone's door in the district by the time that election was done. And so in April I started. Every weekend and every night I went out and knocked on doors. And by July, I had finished the whole district. So I thought, well, it worked so well the first time, I'll go ahead and try a second time. So July I started again, and I started knocking on doors again, and by October I had finished the second time. So I thought, well, worked great twice. People are responding to me. I'll go out and do it a third time. So middle October, I started knocking on doors for the third time. And it was the third time that I realized that I was losing votes. Luckily, I hadn't done enough damage that I was still able to win that race. But it taught me the power of that kind of grassroots politics. that no matter what conventional wisdom say, no matter what the powers that be say, you can bring the fight to people's doors. You can bring them into their living rooms, and you can make a difference. And 4 years later, when I was lucky enough to run for the seat that I hold now on the ground that we stand on, I ran on that same formula and was lucky enough to now have the chance over the last 4 years to represent the great 16th Senate District. But it's been my work in the legislature with many of my colleagues here that really has been what's made me most proud, not my electoral successes. People often ask me why I decided to focus on health care when I came to the state legislature, why I sought out a position on the health committee as a freshman legislator, why I decided to try to be chairman of the committee, the position that I hold now in the Senate. And the answer to that question, I think, is in part the answer to why I'm standing before you today, seeking to bring my voice to the national government. I have a fundamental disagreement with the notion held by this Congress and held by our Congresswoman that in this greatest nation state in the modern world, that your health, your ability to stand on your own 2 feet, to breathe, to walk, to talk, should be dependent on your economic or social standing in this world. I view health care very differently, and this is going to be a fundamental difference between my opposition and myself in this race. I view health care not as a privilege, available only to those who can afford it, but I view health care as a human right. And I hope that everything that I've been able to do and everything that my colleagues have been able to do in the state legislature has been in part an effort to realize that vision. Fights, victories on these issues don't come easy. The interests, and the lobbyists, and the political action committees that make up the healthcare industry have a powerful voice in Washington, and indeed they have a powerful voice in Connecticut as well. But we have won some of those fights. We have had victories over the past several years. I've put a lot of my focus into 2 issues in particular: fighting the excessive prescription drug costs that the drug companies pass on to consumers, and fighting to open up the children's mental health system for the state's most vulnerable children. On that latter front, I'm proud last year to have been the author of legislation that creates the Behavioral Health Partnership in this state, which will end the institutional care of children with mental health and mental illnesses, take them out of emergency rooms, out of institutions, and into community care where they can get the humane, effective treatment that they deserve. I'm proud that this year's state budget includes funding for the first time to move Connecticut forward to allow its citizens to do the right thing, uninsured citizens around this state, to be able to import safe drugs from Canada and Europe. These are victories I'm proud of. But sometimes expanding access to health care means dreaming a little bit bigger than tweaking existing programs. That's why, as speakers before have mentioned, I spent 2 years laboring over a bill that I think is one of the most important that we've passed in the state in the past number of years. We are going to be the leader in this state on taking on some of the most insidious diseases known to man, finding treatments, finding cures for things like Alzheimer's, diabetes, juvenile diabetes, Parkinson's disease. That's why maybe the proudest day that I've had in the state legislature was the day when the Senate and the House passed Connecticut's $100 million investment in stem cell research.